At least once in life, we all have experienced the sudden appearance of someone in our surroundings who ends up occupying all the spaces of our being and our thoughts, as if a peaceful invasion had taken place within us. Beyond logical explanations, this person takes hold of our energy, our thoughts, and ends up inserting themselves into all the mental landscapes and plans we envision. This is often explained under the premise of love and infatuation, but in reality, there could be many other explanations. It's important to open our minds to the possibility that this person's energy is pulling us, but doing so from their own thoughts. In other words, just as we think of them, this person also thinks of us and draws us into their reality. This is something hopeful for many, and also something we will learn to detect today as we take a brief walk through those signs that may indicate that this person is constantly thinking of us. So pay close attention, because the universe and our inner selves give us the clues to know the truth. Number 1. The inexplicable urgency to communicate. While humans were created to be in constant communication with their peers, there are moments when this seems to go beyond a natural need of the self, and a powerful force appears to push you towards a conversation with a specific person. This should not be interpreted as an obsession, as it turns out to be something much more subtle and beautiful, something that speaks of energies and how one person can attract another from their inner strength. It turns out that each of us is composed of energy, one that is not destroyed or extinguished, but rather transformed, and that is as powerful as to pull towards us everything that is within our focus, because in doing so we end up not only putting our attention but also our energy into it. So, every time someone ends up thinking about you constantly, in one way or another they are seeking to manifest you. They pull you and seek to make you present in their life and reality, either through a physical appearance or a simple phone call. And this energy that is directed towards us, and is as strong as that person wants it to be, ends up making itself felt in us, and it is not by any other means than that desire to get in touch with that soul that is thinking of us. The idea that this desire for communication on our part is actually also a desire for interaction from the other party is beautiful, because it indicates that our intrusion into their routine will not be rejected, but will cause great joy and will be rewarded with the same joy with which we initiated it. Although this may seem like a version from fairy tales or romantic novels, in reality, that desired being can be attracted just by thinking about them, because our souls possess an incredible force, one that transcends all physical boundaries and is capable of traversing the greatest distances just to fulfill that longing of our being. There are no recognized limits to the strength of our being, especially when it comes to a person's thoughts, because that is the gateway for all the energies and projections we have about our reality and our future. Let's remember that everything we experience or live is the result of our thoughts, our ideas, and the way we visualize everything within us. So it is not strange to think that when we focus our minds on that being, on their appearance, on what they do, and on opening a channel of communication with them, what ends up happening is that we attract them into our reality. Even if the person we think about is distant from us, and communication between both has long been closed, the force of thought and the desire for interaction can still reach that soul and begin to generate in them a desire for interaction between both. And we must mention that one of the main characteristics of this type of event is the lack of logical explanation for the desire for communication, as usually when we want to talk to someone, there is an important reason behind it. Constantly wanting to see or talk to someone is usually associated with an emotional bond between both parties, but it is not always the case, not even a solidly established friendship, and it is at this moment that we pose more questions. But all these questions can be explained by this recurring thought towards you, which can drag a force capable of leaving us astonished, and which at times can become a bit overwhelming for the person being thought of and attracted. And the truth is that usually that desire does not cease until the person ends up contacting the other party, and until that happens, the thoughts of being invaded will be constant, and one may even experience a sensation of desperation to determine if that person is okay. The capacity of the mind and our energy to break through all barriers set in the earthly plane and make those miracles take shape never ceases to amaze us. Miracles that actually depend greatly on us and our desire to achieve things. As long as the desire to achieve something is strong, we can make it manifest in our reality, even if that involves another soul, because no one is exempt from experiencing that moment when we are the manifestation of others and their soul calls ours to be present in their reality. Number 2. Obsessive thoughts. Although we recently mentioned that it is not about obsessions, the way thoughts about that person can manifest can sometimes cross that line that delimits what is normal from what is obsessive. What the person who is called with the thought by another experiences reaches such a level that they simply cannot stop thinking about the name, the face, and all the characteristics and appearance of that person who is thinking about them. That is why they end up considering that they have fallen into madness, or that their attraction to that being is exceeding the limits of sanity. But instead of thinking that, let's open ourselves for a moment to think about what could give us a slightly more balanced and sensible explanation, one that perhaps also fills us with joy, knowing that we are part of the daily thoughts of another person. And together with the previous point, we find the possibility of knowing a little about what is in the mind of that being that constantly lives in our thoughts, which is somehow calling us to their reality, and what better ally to do so than a series of recurring thoughts, which are generated by that powerful force that comes from the depths of our being. According to great scholars, among whom we find Dolores, the fact that a person appears repeatedly and constantly in our minds can be a strong indication of the way in which they seek to manifest us in their reality. According to this woman, just generating a thought about a person or thing is the beginning of a process of manifestation of the same, which will see a happy ending by simply keeping ourselves aligned with the energies of the universe and an appropriate vibrational frequency. It is on this premise that this woman relies to explain how everything around us is designed by ourselves, because from our thoughts we end up projecting and sending the necessary information to the universe so that it creates and directs it towards our reality. Therefore, when we keep a person in our thoughts, the energy emitted from us is directed towards that person, and we end up attracting them into our reality, making that person walk towards us in the same way we are drawn to them. Let's see it as two magnets pulling each other, all thanks to the force and charge they possess within each one, just as it ends up happening in reality, as souls, through their energy and the charge of their thoughts and feelings, end up dragging that person into interactions with them. An important characteristic of these thoughts is that they seem not to calm down for anything other than interaction with that person, or at least news about them, remaining steadfast throughout the day and night. Another important characteristic of these thoughts is how they arise, because from the way they originate, we can determine if they are an effect of that person's thoughts, or simply a group of thoughts and feelings resulting from profound obsession or lack of psychological balance. When these thoughts arise towards a person we have come to know in the earthly plane, but who, for one reason or another, is distant from us, they can be understood as infatuation, or as our being remaining in their mind. However, it is important to understand that these thoughts will not arise from a logical reason, such as a common interest, shared space, or an activity that unites them, but will appear out of the blue and without prior notice, leaving the person experiencing them deeply puzzled. This is a key part of the obsessive thoughts we refer to in this point, and although it may seem a bit absurd, it is important to consider this part of our symptoms as they define much of that energy that comes from the other person to us. So if suddenly you begin to experience these strange thoughts towards another person, which will always be positive, about love and union, it is definitely up to us to evaluate if what is really happening is that we are part of another person's thoughts, one that from the depths of themselves calls us to join their reality immediately and without further explanation. Number 3. Experience a sense of closeness. This represents one of the most beautiful points to touch on in the midst of our shortlist because it speaks to how a soul can unmistakably recognize the presence of another in nearby spaces, as if they could predict that strange encounter that has not been planned between these two characters. And it's that many times we underestimate the capacity of our soul, and the way in which in the midst of its perfection, it manages to amaze us with its deep vision and perception of the universe, of what surrounds us, and of those people who are in our reality. This is something that is not only applied in everyday life but also occurs in the midst of the bond that two souls establish through their recurring thoughts. More than a simple bond that seeks to show us how one's thoughts affect the other. From the moment we cross paths, we end up making our soul recognize the other and form with it a connection that few understand. And far beyond the simple, the way we sense that encounter or that closeness to the other is simply fascinating. Because the way we can confidently say if we are close to our counterpart is not something that is easy to achieve. As if we were perfect proximity or soul detectors, what our being feels every time we are meters away from the other is very intense, and it makes that person confidently say whether it is this or another soul. This is a sensation that some have described as a deep tingling that runs through our entire body, and a feeling of encouragement that cannot be explained from the logical or simple, because even if that person has been deeply wounded or discouraged, from one second to the next, their being begins to be filled with a wonderful and pure energy. This occurs as if we were to take a phone and put it on charge under the fast or turbo mode, since in a matter of minutes we end up being back at full capacity. The only difference is that this charger is the beloved person, and it comes into action through proximity. This may pleasantly surprise many, but for many others, it is simply a clear demonstration of the power and capabilities of our soul, and of how often, through acts that are unconscious but beautiful, we end up exposing the true power of our soul. And don't be surprised if at some point you begin to feel a strange sensation that invites us to think that the person who is constantly on our mind is nearby, as if it were an internal voice whispering messages of love to us. And if indeed this signal becomes present, you must understand that the person you are thinking of is constantly thinking of you, and that they are consciously or unconsciously seeking to pull you into their life until the moment you simply become present. Number 4. Hearing the person's name everywhere. Many may see this as mere silliness and feel that it's very normal to hear all kinds of names in the surrounding environment. However, if we measure the number of times we have heard the name of an acquaintance in the past versus the number of times we now hear the name of that person, what we will discover will be impactful. There are things that may seem like simple coincidences, because it's common to experience them at different times in our lives. But what should catch our attention is how they now occur in a more regular, frequent, and even clearer manner. This is precisely what happens at this point, and it invites us to always take into account the regularity of things and events associated with that special person who never leaves our thoughts and reality, no matter how distant they may be from us. The very title of this point speaks volumes about what constitutes this clear sign that someone is thinking of you. Besides merely thinking of you and having the ability to sense your proximity and feel the desire to interact with your soul, we also repeatedly hear the name or nickname that is used for that person in the earthly plane within our surroundings. This might go unnoticed when the person's name is quite common, as we feel that anyone could be called that, and at any given moment, someone might mention the name without necessarily referring to that specific person. But things become quite remarkable when the name of that person is rather uncommon. Moreover, it doesn't seem like a mere coincidence when someone spontaneously brings up that identifying name of the person. It's also very intriguing for the person when someone else mentions in their environment the nickname used to refer to that particular person, as this has the power to strongly capture our attention. You might perceive this as completely unhinged, yet the universe has become the support that soul needs to make us come to our senses. We're only witnessing how that person's energy permeates every space and manages to send you reminders of their presence and how they seek to make themselves known. Let's take this more as a way to ignite that apparent obsession that is generating in your being, and let a new perspective guide us, one from which we can all achieve from within what occupies us and what we deeply desire. Therefore, as it's this person's deep desire, we are also being somehow driven as the energy that we are, and that comprises us. Let's allow everything to flow freely with our own thoughts and those of that person, and let these symptoms manifest themselves, because only through them will you be able to realize if you are truly immersed in the thoughts of that special being. And if we are a bit more daring, we will dare to feel fortunate to see how a being is capable of moving all this to make us present in their reality, understanding that often the connection with these individuals goes back much further than we believe, tracing back to our previous incarnations. Number 5. Unexpected encounters. Amidst the powerful signs we can detect when determining if we are present in someone else's thoughts, we come across this small manifestation of the other's desire for closeness. Beyond the energetic information shared between souls in this process, we may also encounter these unexpected and unplanned encounters. While at times romance novels have led us to think that one can engineer their presence through a simple oversight or coincidence, the magic truly unfolds when neither of the two has orchestrated this meeting of souls on a physical plane. While it's understandable that people who share spaces or interests may bump into each other, there is evidence of how two beings who share none of these coincidences in their lives, their tastes, or their routines somehow end up meeting one way or another. This is intriguing because it speaks to how we are unconsciously guided in this earthly plane by our soul and its plans and desires, making us pass through certain points of knowledge and happiness as if by obligation. As we expressed earlier, the profound connection established between souls as a result of this energetic exchange can be so powerful as to pull the physical bodies of these souls toward each other, as well as to guide the thoughts of that being toward the bond they share. And although there may not be a romantic relationship between the two parties, we must understand that connections are not solely affectionate, but composed of energies and the exchange of these in their various forms. That's why what is experienced can be so powerful, yet subtle, pushing us towards that closeness between souls and bodies, but without us detecting it until the force that binds them becomes very evident and originates from the souls of both parties. And if suddenly you begin to notice how that person who previously had no common ground with you suddenly appears on streets near you, or even enters a place that is recurrent for you, but without the conscious intention of seeing you, then you must understand that that person has been thinking of you recurrently and has drawn your being in front of their eyes. But we can also see this signal manifest when we are suddenly called to explore a new place, walk down a new street, or even go to a restaurant that is new to us. And right in the midst of this exploration of the unknown, we encounter that person whom we've been thinking about so much. Beyond those places that are trendy because they are new, or sites that become fashionable due to their novelty, the true form of this signal will be seen in those moments when the spaces serving as a backdrop for the encounter are regular but unfamiliar to us. That's where we can evidence the lack of intention when it comes to the meeting and how the universe has orchestrated everything for you to manifest in that person's reality. Often these encounters serve as a springboard for both souls to interact and converse, thus calming the desires for closeness, communication, and energetic exchange that arise in both. Number 6. Recurring dreams with that person. There may not be a clearer way to determine that someone is thinking about us than their manifestation in our lives far beyond the physical plane, as it's true that people have the ability to interact in this and other dimensions. According to Dolores canon, human beings have the ability to be multidimensional beings who can not only draw knowledge and spaces from the dimension in which we currently inhabit, but also align ourselves correctly to experience this journey between dimensions, encountering different souls and forms of life which communicate and interact with us in beautiful ways. This ability is innate in each and every one of the beings that inhabit the earth and the universe, but in the case of humans, it tends to be numbed by ourselves and our desires to remain on the side of unconsciousness. However, after many years of research and soul regression and healing therapies, this researcher and author realized how our soul continues to have the same potential with which it was created at its core, and shows how, through healing traumas and aligning our vibration, we can once again set this part of ourselves in motion. This leads us to think that those things we experience at certain times are nothing more than interactions between dimensions and the ability of our soul to move between these planes in search of knowledge, guidance, rest, and even nutrients for this spiritual journey we face. In this sense, it is necessary to explain that for many years, dreams have been seen as that moment when our soul can move from our physical body and from our dimension to others that offer profound moments of enlightenment, important guidance for its journey, and of course, interaction with other souls and beings of light. But what very few understand or accept is that even in those spaces, we can coincide with souls we know in this earthly plane, which are immediately recognized by us, all based on that particular energy they possess and how our being reacts to them. This is where this signal is born, which speaks of how in the midst of those dreams we manage to have approaches or sightings of this soul that thinks of us regularly and somehow pulls us into that encounter. This mode of interaction is precious and pure because often those realms offer a wider range of possibilities than we have in our plane, and there those two souls can dance freely and harmoniously, completely free from the bindings and limitations of the earthly plane. We must understand that these dreams do not necessarily have to present the physical form of the person, as there are many other ways to make ourselves present to others, such as through our voice or our mere presence. Just sit and remember how sometimes you have felt in the midst of your dreams a presence that you believe to be familiar or recognize as familiar, which gives us that feeling of comfort and security because of its familiarity. Sometimes we even feel like our being is familiar with this energy, understanding that it is a being that has coincided with us in this earthly plane. In the regularity of these dreams, we will find a clear signal that this person cannot get us out of their thoughts, and therefore pulls us forcefully towards them and their presence, both in this plane and others. Number 7, sudden energy fluctuations. To simplify the understanding of this point, let's stop calling them fluctuations and start calling them unexpected or sudden energy changes, which are nothing more than those bursts of energy or emotional lows that the being experiences without any logical explanation. There is absolutely nothing that is random or without reason, so we must delve deeper whenever something in our life seems to have no logical explanation. Because in the midst of a more earthly realm, we may be finding that answer we seek. In this very specific case, it's common to see how the individual experiences sudden bursts of energy, motivation, or even happiness, which aren't triggered by any external or internal factors in their life, but rather are a response to the energetic exchange they have with the other soul through the thoughts directed towards them. This is not to mention that from the very moment this interaction begins, an interconnection is established between these two individuals, transmitting important information from one point to the other, often unconsciously for one or both parties. But beyond what is consciously acknowledged, this flow of energy and information always takes place, with messages about the emotional and energetic states of the person passing back and forth, showing how this energy and information end up affecting the other party. So, as you may already suspect, these bursts of energy or joy are a result of the emotional or energetic states of the person who constantly thinks of you, who at the very moment you feel the surge of energy is experiencing an increase in that specific emotion or in the energy and motivation they have. But this phenomenon doesn't only occur with positive experiences for that individual. It doesn't discriminate the type of emotion and encompasses absolutely everything that soul feels, transmitting that emotional state in real time. It's as if a program suddenly installs in us, allowing us to know in real time what the other person immersed in the bond feels, as if we could assist them in moments of anguish, sadness, or deep fear. This is a magnificent display of the capacity of our soul and how our energy affects others, especially those who are part of our environment or who share an energetic connection with our soul beyond the ordinary. That's why we may also feel moments when our energy declines without an obvious or apparent reason, leaving us deeply puzzled, but it's nothing more than another indication of how our being is immersed in a profound bond that goes beyond the physical and romantic aspects. There are also records of individuals who have experienced a profound panic attack or anxiety, which they immediately recognize as not originating from themselves, and which is accompanied by thoughts about that person. They choose to communicate with that individual to ensure they are okay, only to discover through this contact that the person has gone through a situation of profound pain, or even where they are in great danger. It's important to recognize when these energetic variations do not come from ourselves and what we experience, and to address them in cases where they occur more abruptly or negatively. Number 8. Suddenly perceiving the person's scent. To conclude this list of signs indicating that someone is thinking about us repeatedly, we must obligatorily mention this phenomenon associated with the body's senses and its memory. We must remember that our senses are especially connected to our memory and the experiences we store in it, understanding that we not only store images associated with moments lived, but also textures, sounds, flavors, and in this case, scents are also associated with experiences lived and the people in our environment. This is a scientifically proven phenomenon that has left many astonished by the mind's ability to bring back to our present those things we lived and associated with a particular sensation. But even more astonishing is how our being associates people with specific scents, retaining the image and vivid memory of their being and appearance, and bringing them back by simply detecting that particular fragrance. This is greatly associated with the body's natural odours and the beautiful scents it emits, which, when combined with spices, fragrances and perfumes, give each person a unique and particular smell. And while it's true that a person can change fragrances countless times, memory associates them with the scent they had the first time they had a strong connection or intense encounter, storing their memory in association with that characteristic scent. In the midst of this, another opportunity arises for the soul to make us remember and keep present that person who is constantly thinking about us and transmitting their eagerness to be present and close. Indeed, there have been many records of moments when a person suddenly perceives that particular scent of the other part of this bond, evoking memories of shared experiences and images of that person within them. This marks an exact and wonderful way in which souls communicate and establish a profound connection which cannot simply be ignored, as the force that unites them will not allow it, and any means will be used to keep one in the other's mind. But all this originates from the conscious way in which one of these parties establishes that connection with the other, from their desire to keep them in thoughts and even bring them into their reality. According to Dolores canon, all of this comes from the mind and its ability to decipher these energetic messages that our soul receives, and once understood at a level beyond consciousness, they can generate all these phenomena, as impressive as they are, bewildering to some. And only those who choose to consider a more spiritual path will be able to understand and accept this knowledge. being able to see how we ourselves replicate this fragrance from the memories associated with our senses, causing us to establish memories and thoughts about that person who is also thinking about us. This occurs in a perfect way, as if just by thinking of someone, our vibration reaches that person and indicates to them to think of us as well, thereby entering into a perfect harmony and a mode of communication that extends far beyond words. And if you have experienced one or more of these signs, you can be sure that you are in the thoughts of that other person who has managed to invade your mind and your spaces. To conclude, it would be great if you shared in the comments the testimony of what you have experienced. I'll be reading, as well as other people who perfectly understand what you're going through. If you liked the content, please give it a like. And if you feel it would help someone you know, please don't hesitate to share it. Because in this space, we are all here to grow and become more aware every day. Finally, I invite you to join this beautiful community where we come together in curiosity and a desire to grow. To do so, subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss any of our future encounters. For now, I bid you farewell, but with the firm promise that we will meet again soon through this same channel.